Welcome to the Better Together Here podcast with your hosts Devin
and Ashley,
helping you make the most of your time in New York City. Hey everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Better Together Here podcast. My name is Devin.
And my name is Ashley.
And in today's episode, we are going to give you 5 common mistakes that people make when they first visit New York City. These are mistakes that end up costing you money, time, and sometimes worse. And we're also going to give you a bonus mistake that people make at the end, courtesy of our dog Scout. So make sure you stick around for that. Let us say first that even if you've been to New York a couple times, these are good reminders for mistakes to avoid. So let's start with number 1. Many people think that when they're coming to New York City that they need to stay in Times Square, and that is not the case. In most instances, Times Square is more expensive than other places that you could stay. So what's more important than staying in Times Square is that in all likelihood you're in Manhattan, especially if it's your first time here and you're planning on doing a lot of the more kind of tourist-centric things. You're going to want to stay in Manhattan. It's more important, though, that you are near a subway station.
There definitely are some benefits to staying in Times Square, especially if you are wanting to go to a lot of museums. A lot of the museums are kind of central around Midtown area, or especially if you are wanting to go to quite a few Broadway shows while you're here, staying in Times Square would be a lot easier. However, you don't have to stay in Times Square, and like Devin said, being close to a subway station, pretty much if you're staying anywhere in Manhattan near a subway station, you can get anywhere else in Manhattan in about 25-30 minutes.
Yeah, so prioritize staying within, I would say, a 5 at most 10-minute walk of a subway station, unless you're the type of person who knows that you are going to take a taxi or Uber everywhere, and then that's less relevant. But in most instances, you're going to be very happy if you stay next to a subway station. So that's number 1. Don't think that you have to stay in Times Square. Know that you can just stay anywhere in Manhattan and have a pretty great experience. Okay, that takes us to number 2. Most people, when they come into the city, you land at the airport, and traveling is hectic, right? Like traveling is stressful. It's confusing, especially if it's your first time in a new city, a big city. And it might just, your instinct can be, oh, let me just take an Uber, or let me just take a taxi. That'll be easier. And frankly, it is easier, but it's going to be so much more expensive. So if you want to save a little bit of money, know that every single airport that you fly into New York City, you can take public transit. We've done an entire episode comparing each of the 3 airports. All of them have public transportation options. For Newark, you have to take a train into the city, and then you can take a subway from there. For LaGuardia, you take a bus that takes you to the subway station, and then you take a subway into the city. For JFK, you take the air train, which takes you to a subway station, takes you into the city. All of those options are going to cost you less than $15 a person. For LaGuardia, it's only $2.90. For JFK, it's around $10. For Newark, it's around $15.
Which is a huge difference between what an Uber from any of those places are going to cost you. I would guess an average Uber from any of the airports would be like $70 or $80 average.
It is easier than you'd think to take public transit, especially when you download our NYC transportation guide. We have an entire PDF guide that is completely free on our website that step-by-step shows you how to take public transportation from all of the airports into New York City. It also goes over the subway. It also goes over hailing taxis, walking, riding bikes if you want, all the good things. So make sure that you download the transportation guide and you will be confident. We have pictures that show you the signs to look for within the airport, all the things that are important. So know that you do not have to take a taxi or an Uber from the airport into the city. You can take public transit.
I will also add, if you're going to come to the city, definitely check out our transportation guide. And I would also send it to the people that you're coming to New York City with, because there's nothing more stressful than being with a group of people where each person is being like, no, we need to go this way, or, oh, we can just take a taxi, and everyone's trying to call an Uber at the same time. Just get everybody on the same page, send everyone the transportation guide. It will make your trip easier. I guarantee it.
This was a setup, I want you to know. Ashley just wanted to tell her favorite story about me and her dad. So when I'll tee it off. So this is also like another just kind of like pro tip for when you're traveling in a group of people. It's a good idea to have a conversation before the trip when you first get there and kind of designate someone who is in charge of the directions. Because if not, you're going to have way too many cooks in the kitchen. And when you are stressed trying to get somewhere in a new city, trying to navigate public transportation, and not only do you have that stressor, but you have multiple people saying, I think we should go this way, I think we should go that way, it's not going to work very well. So when we went to Japan, we went to Tokyo, and it was me and Ashley and her dad.
Talk about a complicated subway system. It's very efficient, and Tokyo's huge, and they do a great job. But if you don't speak Japanese and you're not that great or like adept at public transit, which we were not at this time, it was so confusing to get around.
But a seriously intricate system. I mean, the main station that we stayed near, like their version of Times Square had, I think, like a dozen subway lines running through it. Whereas like in Times Square, you have maybe 4 to 6. So very, very intricate. Long story, mostly short. The first day that we're there, I'm on my phone looking at directions for the place we're trying to go. Ashley's dad's on his phone looking for directions for the place. Ashley's looking at directions. We're all saying different things. And
there was one point where we were all pointing different directions, being like, we need to go this way.
And we finally decided, I don't know how it exactly happened, but there was some type of conversation. And I said, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to be the lead on the directions here. And if I'm wrong, then I'll be wrong and we will assess from there, but we're only going to have one person in charge. And guess what? I was in charge of the directions the rest of the trip. I got us lost once or twice, but the vast majority of times I got us where we needed to go. So that is just a sidebar pro tip. Have one person who's in charge of directions. Whether they think they're the person who's better at directions or they actually are, it doesn't really matter. It's just better if you have one person who is doing it versus everyone trying to look it up on their phone and getting differing results and pointing different directions and everyone getting frustrated.
If we write an article about this podcast, I'm going to add the picture of you and my dad looking at the intricate subway station of Tokyo, and you guys both look so stressed and you're both like pointing in different ways. It's just the best.
Both phone in the hand, both pointing different places. It was a lot, but that's our little pro tip. But about New York City, download our public transportation, our navigation guide. It will make your life a lot easier. Okay, on to the next one. This is one that I think is one of the more overwhelming parts of coming to New York City for the first time, especially if you maybe don't have as much experience with big cities, or you are coming from a place where people are very friendly and people talk to each other on the streets, and that's kind of your MO with experiencing the world around you. Totally good, totally healthy thing. A mistake that people make in New York City is that they think that they have to engage with people who are trying to talk to them on the street. Let's be as clear as we can from the get-go. Most people, I'm not going to say all, most people who are trying to talk to you on the streets of New York City are trying to take advantage of you.
And just to clarify, we're not talking about like a friendly pedestrian, like,
can I get directions?
Yeah, like trying to get directions. Like this is like, for example, someone on like a pedicab, like trying to sell you a tour in Central Park that's like coming up to you, or trying to like sell you like a bike ride. Someone trying to hand you CDs. The different breakdancers that you'll see like in Central Park or in Times Square that will like try to engage with you and like try to get you to watch the show.
They're trying to take advantage of you.
Yeah. Plain and simple. There are people that dress up in like costume in Times Square, and they'll be like, oh, do you want a picture? Like, oh, like, does your child want a picture with us? But then you'll take a picture and try to walk away, and they'll be like, oh, that'll be $20.
Yeah.
And you've already taken the picture at that point. What are you going to do? Like pull out your phone and delete it? Where like they don't really make it clear that it's going to cost $20 for your 4-year-old to get a picture with Spider-Man.
Yeah. A couple other places where this happens, often again in kind of the more tourist heavy spots, there'll be people trying to sell you on comedy shows in the city, which there are amazing comedy shows. There are amazing places to go see comedy. We will do an episode on that in the future.
The comedy scene in New York is elite.
But the people trying to sell you these comedy shows in Times Square, no dice, not worth your time. Don't do it.
My personal experience with that, I was 19. It was my first like real trip to New York City with my dad. Came with my dad on a business trip, and we were staying in Times Square, which we were going to a lot of Broadway shows, so that made sense. But we were staying in Times Square, and there was a guy selling tickets, and he was like, oh, look, there's all these famous people that started at this comedy club. And I was 19. I didn't know. I bought 2 tickets. I was like, oh, like a comedy show. This will be so fun for me and my dad. We showed up. It was like a Friday night at like 10 p.m. So like a comedy club should be packed at that time.
It's peak time for comedy clubs.
There was like 5 people in there total. It was like this dingy basement, and all of the comedians we saw were like absolutely plastered, first of all. Comedy was not funny, and there was one comedian that kept continuously making jokes alluding to the fact that like my dad and I were together, like dating. And we were like, oh no, like I'm his daughter. And they were like, oh, right. Like to the point where it was like you could hear a pin drop in there. It was so uncomfortable. It was the worst comedy show I've ever been to. So that, not to say that like that comedy club doesn't put out good comedy occasionally, but that was my personal experience. And I wish that I had done my research and hadn't bought tickets from a random man on the street trying to come up and sell me something.
We'll do another episode in the future, but don't go to these comedy shows in Times Square that they're trying to sell you on the street. Go to Comedy Cellar, go to The Stand. We'll talk about others in a future episode. One other place that you'll see it often is as you're trying to get on the Staten Island Ferry, or if you're down in Battery Park area at all, there will be people who try to sell you on tours that they tell you they're going to Staten Island Ferry, but they're actually not, and they just go buy it, and they charge you exorbitant amounts of money, when in reality, if you want to actually go to the Statue of Liberty, it's only purchased through the website. And if you want to just go buy the Statue of Liberty, you can take the Staten Island Ferry, which is 100% free. So don't get duped by these people. A couple other common ones, I think Ashley kind of mentioned it. There'll be people who say, hey, do you want a free CD? And then they hand it to you, and then they say, oh, that's $20. There are also other common ones where people are trying to sell you like rosary beads, or people trying to say they're going to give you free roses and then they want to charge you $25. Or, you know, there's other ones where people act like they're running into you and act like all their things fell on the ground, or you broke their glasses, and then they want to say, oh, you owe me $100 for my glasses. So this isn't to like scare you, because at the end of the day, these things aren't like ultra, they're common, but they're not like, if you just know what to look for, you can avoid it. And all of this to say, you can be the stereotypical New York asshole and just ignore people on the street, and it is totally fine. It's honestly what you should do. When I walk through Times Square, if I'm walking through Times Square, I do not engage with anybody who tries to engage with me. I just don't do it, because there's not much upside. Again, clearly if it's like a family and they need directions, I'm not just going to blow past them, but like, you'll know it when you see it. You've been warned.
And the highest incidence rate for people coming up to you trying to get in your face and sell you something is going to be in Times Square.
And that leads us to this episode's You'll Have to Check It Out segment.
The next stop is
Terra Blues Jazz Club. All right, so we went here for the first time a couple months ago. Ashley's brother was in town. He lived here for a year or two back in his college or post-college days, and he used to go to this place. He loved it. He talked it up, and we're like, all right, let's go out. Let's check it out.
He really wanted to go, and he was like, this place was the spot 20 years ago, and I think it's still cool, so let's check it out. And it was.
It was awesome. It is, so they have the way it functions, on weekdays, I believe it's like slightly different, where you may be able to just go in and grab a drink, but there's usually a cover charge. I think on weekends it's 20, weekdays it might be 15. There's sometimes where it's not a cover charge. No, on the weekend, if you go in, you're going to need to pay the cover charge. I think it's about $20. That gets you into Terra Blues Jazz Club. The drink prices are actually pretty fair when it comes to New York City standards, especially for being, you know, a jazz club. They have some light bites and kind of snack and food options. It is a whiskey heavy menu, so they have tons of different whiskey options. They have some whiskey flights, lots of great options, but you are going here for the music. So when you pay to get in, they have live musicians on the weekends. I think they usually start around 7 and go till 2, maybe 3 in the morning. And once you pay the cover charge to get in, you can stay for as many hours as you would like. So you can really get hours and hours of live, high quality jazz music for $20. You don't have to buy drinks. Obviously, you probably want to, you can, but like you don't have to. So you can get in and spend $20. And it was amazing. When we went, there was it was a quartet, right? Jazz quartet, right? So there was 2 people on guitar, a bassist, and a drummer. And let me tell you, it was some of the best live jazz music that I've seen in person. And it's very compact and very intimate, and you are like right up there near the musicians. It's
kind of like a candlelit, like upstairs cellar vibe, like big, beautiful round ceiling, really cozy, very like elegant, but not pretentious.
Yes. And that's my worry often with jazz clubs, is that it can feel like a little bit overwhelming, and sometimes they are pretentious, but very down to earth. Everyone was just there for a good time, good vibes. The music was phenomenal. One thing to be aware of is that on the weekends, they don't take reservations after I think 8 o'clock or even 7 o'clock, but you don't really need one. There's a lot of kind of tables up near the front that are actually kind of like the seating area to be closer to the music, but then there's also bar seating, there's seating towards the back, there's some standing area. People kind of shuffle in and out throughout the night, so when we first showed up, we kind of stood around for a minute, went to the side a little bit, and we're in kind of a standing area, and then a table opened up and we just moved up. And they take breaks in between acts, and so there's plenty of time and opportunity to get close and to be kind of right in the heart of it, and it is phenomenal live music. So we highly recommend you check out Terra Blues Jazz Club. This is down kind of more downtown near NYU. Great spot. Also, this is total side note, and it'll be the last note on this Terra Blues Jazz Club, but after Terra Blues, we saw our first like real street fight in New York City at like 2 a.m, and that was an experience. It had nothing to do with Terra Blues, but it was like these like literal college bros like getting into this street fight, and then like as quick as it started, it was over.
It was wild. I think everyone was okay, but it was just a whole bunch of 19-year-old wrestler boys that needed to get some energy out, I think.
Yeah, it was like your very stereotypical, like probably they were fighting about one of them talked to the other guy's girlfriend or something, and then they're all like yelling and trying to be tough, and there was a little fighting, and then they all like walked away and were buddies again, probably. Who knows? Total sidebar.
That was a very different vibe, coming from Terra Blues to a street fight of a whole bunch of boys.
But that's New York. You're in like a beautiful building, you're hearing live music, and you're having this like cozy experience, and then you walk outside and there's like a guy pooping on the street. Like, this is just New York. Like, again, know what you're
Keeps you on your toes.
Know what you're getting into. All right, that was this episode's You'll Have to Check It Out segment, Terra Blues Jazz Club. And now, back to Common Mistakes.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
All right, number 4 on our list. This one might get us in a little bit of hot water with some locals and some people, but avoid eating at most, I'm going to emphasize most, of the food carts, unless you know it's reputable. So, for example, there are a couple good food carts. There is like the actual Halal Guys, which is in Midtown near a Hilton hotel. There is...
I think it's called Adele's.
Adele's?
We haven't been there, but it's another type of Halal Guys type cart, and that seems to be the new most popular one on social media. It always has a really crazy line. It's right across from Radio City Music Hall. I've heard great things about it. I just haven't wanted to wait in that line.
There's also La Burrialandia, which is a taco food truck, amazing food truck. So that's like slightly different than food cart. There are also a couple hot dog food carts that actually have like a reputation, and you can look them up. And that would be our kind of catalyst here, is like if you're just walking down some random street, like you're on 46th Street and 8th Avenue, and there's a guy selling hot dogs, like, frankly, they're probably not going to be very good. I know
that was a good pun.
What?
Frankly.
Frankly.
A man selling hot dogs.
And his name is Frank, selling, frankly, not good hot dogs. Here's the thing, is like people, they hear like, oh, I've got to get like some street food from New York. And again, time and place, and like some of them are good, but I would recommend not going this route unless you can like look it up and see some of the reviews, or if you can like actually see that it looks okay. We've just gotten some awful food cart food before. The worst churro we've ever had in our life
was in Central Park.
Yeah.
It was such a bummer because I was like, I love a good churro, and I spent like so much money on it. I think it was like $6 or $7 for this churro, and it was like cold and frozen on the inside and had no flavor.
Like kids, like middle schoolers in home ec class make better churros than what was being sold in Central
Certainly.
Park.
Part of what concerns me about some of the street food in New York is you'll see like raw chicken on a skewer just sitting out for so long. Like it's piled like 10 rows high, and nobody's in line to eat that. So how long has that been sitting there raw, or like it's cooked and then just like sitting at room temperature? Just the food safety standard concerns me, especially with the types of cards that are making like everything under the sun. I don't think you can really do everything well. Another thing to look out for with food cards, if there's like a decently long line, it might be okay.
Yeah.
It might be solid. I'm specifically talking about the food cards that primarily are doing meat, that are just kind of like sitting out, stacked and cooked in room temperature.
Just consider yourself warned, all right, with the food cards. Okay, number 5, a very, very common mistake. This has changed within the last, I think, 3 to 5 years, and so this is why some people get confused by it. When you ride the subway, you do not have to buy a subway card. There are machines where you can buy a subway card, and you swipe it through the little turnstile swipey thing that sucks and never, ever works, and you're always in a rush trying to get to the train that's about to come, and it never swipes correctly. You don't need to do that. I believe every single station in New York City now, there might be a few that are not up to date, but pretty much all of them have what's called Omni, OMNY, and it's just a little kind of screen that's near the turnstile, and it is a tap-to-pay device. So you can use a debit or credit card that has tap-to-pay enabled. You can use something like Apple Pay or Google Pay, anything that you can usually tap-to-pay with, including your card, you can use. So most cards nowadays, debit or credit, have a tap-to-pay feature. And so you can just use that to get on to the subway. It'll charge you the $2.90 just like it would if you bought a subway card. Also, the subway card costs money. So if you buy the subway card, that costs $1. Some people like that for the nostalgia of it. But the most efficient, most effective way to pay for the subway is to just use your credit card or debit card or something like Apple Pay.
It used to be beneficial for you to buy the unlimited 7-day subway card because it ended up being cheaper if you knew you were going to take the subway a lot, because you could ride as many times as you wanted and wouldn't have to pay more. However, with Omni, they added in a caveat to that system so that you get the exact same discount and you're not paying more.
So what it says on their website is you use the same device or card in a 7-day period, and as soon as you hit 12 rides that you've paid for, the rest of your rides after that in the 7-day period will be free. So it functions just like the unlimited card, and it ends up being the same price as what the unlimited card used to be, or I think it still is. You can still buy it, but essentially it does it for you without you having to actually use the subway card. A couple notes on this to be aware of. If you tap your credit card, it does not let you tap it right after for someone else. So like if you're going with your significant other, for example, and you're thinking, oh, I could get to 12 rides really quickly by just tapping the same card twice for both of us to get through the turnstile, that's not going to work. So be aware of that. Also, if you're using Apple Pay, it's going to do it based off of your device. So if you happen to share a credit card and have it linked on 2 different devices, that will work for you to tap through, but the 12 free rides will only be based off of that device's thing. So hopefully that makes sense. We'll share a link to kind of the Omni page that talks about this, but just know, you do not have to buy a subway card. You can still get the benefits of a 7-day unlimited just by tapping like you normally would with your card.
In my opinion, another benefit of doing the Omni and not buying the subway card is sometimes you're like, oh, I'm definitely going to be riding the subway every single time I want to go anywhere in New York. I'm going to buy the unlimited card. But then you're locked into the $30+ subway card. And what happens if it's raining all weekend and you don't want to actually walk to and from the subway and you want to take a cab or you want to take an Uber? You're going to kind of like force yourself into having to take the subway because you already paid for it. And I think this gives you a lot more flexibility.
So those are 5 common mistakes that people make when they first come to New York City. And as we promised, a 6th bonus idea. This one is courtesy of our dog Scout. So we have 2 Labrador retrievers. One of them, super food driven. When we're walking, she just like loves being on the sidewalks because her name is Sunny. She is just looking for snacks, having a good time.
She loves the street snacks. That is her favorite part of being a New Yorker.
And then we have Scout, who only wants to just go straight ahead, 1,000,000 miles an hour, which is also how many New Yorkers walk. And yes, the stereotypes are true. People walk fast on the street. We've done an entire episode about this, not walking slow on the sidewalk, but this is the mistake not to make of walking extremely slow on sidewalks, but more so than that is taking up a ton of space on a sidewalk or stopping in the middle of the sidewalk. If you're with a group of 4 or 5 people, please do not walk 4 or 5 wide. You can talk once you get to the place that you're going to. The sidewalks in New York are not built for large groups to walk 4 or 5 across. You're taking up the entire sidewalk at that point. People are going both directions. We've talked about it before, but you need to understand that just like if you were in a car and the person in front of you, if you're on a car with a 35 mile an hour speed limit and the person in front of you was going 10 miles an hour or stopped out of the blue, you would be very frustrated as a driver. It's the same thing here, but with the sidewalks. People commute on sidewalks because when you get off the subway, you have to walk on the sidewalk to get to your final destination. And so commutes are happening, just not on the roads like you would be at home in your car. So just be aware, and Scout will thank you. We don't often swear on this podcast, which probably is disingenuous to us as human beings and also to New York culture, but we've got a good story for you about this concept.
One of our really good friends here in New York, his name is Branson, and he's pretty like outspoken, honest, been in New York for 10 or 15 years now, like New Yorker through and through at this point. But he was talking to us about how many tourists there were out like on the streets, especially in December. I swear New York in Midtown doubles in population because everyone wants to come to New York in the wintertime because it's beautiful and Christmas is awesome here. But he said that he kind of lost his mind at a group of tourists because he just was having a bad day. And there were a whole bunch of tourists standing in the middle of the sidewalk, taking up so much space that he couldn't fully pass through. And in typical New York fashion, walked by them, looked at them, and said, "By all means, stand in the middle of the fucking sidewalk," and then strutted off. I'm sure it bummed out those tourists because they probably didn't know what they were doing wrong, but it's one of my favorite quotes of his.
We quote it all the time. And if you hear that, look around because it might be us saying that to you. Just kidding. We probably wouldn't say that to you, but maybe.
Which, to be fair, like when we were visiting New York one time, somebody did bark at me for being in the middle of the sidewalk. And I was like, whoa,
correct.
Like people here are mean. But now that I live here, I understand why that is. Like you wouldn't stop in the middle of the highway. So why are people stopping in the middle of the sidewalk? And it's just not something that you learn if you don't live in a big city and you're not commuting on the sidewalks.
So keep it in mind. When you're walking on the sidewalks, walk at a standard pace. Don't take up a ton of space. If you need to stop to look at directions or whatever it is, just kind of pull over to the side, just like you would in a car. If you needed to do something that caused you to stop in the car or slow down completely, you would pull over to the side of the road. And our dog Scout will thank you because Scout, she will very passively aggressively walk up on your heels and try to weave around you if you're walking too slow. And it is hilarious. And we honestly, despite it maybe frustrating people, we totally lean into it because we think it is so funny because she is somehow a New York dog through and through, even though she was not raised here, but she is like a New Yorker dog through and through. And she wants to get somewhere fast. And if you are in her way, you better move.
She'll like swerve around people and then she'll look back at them and like give them the look like, why are you walking like that?
Consider yourself warned. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have not already, like we talked about, make sure you download our NYC transportation guide. It's going to give you all the information that you need for navigating the subway, navigating to and from the airports. You can just go to bettertogetherhere.com. There's a big button in the menu that says free transportation guide or free navigation guide, something to that effect. If you have not already, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Spotify, engage with us wherever you are. We welcome your feedback, your reviews, your emails. You can email us hello@bettertogetherhere.com. And other than that, we'll catch you on the next episode.